afternoon, everyone. I see some stranglers at the back. I know it's a weekday, it's 3 p.m. Your body is telling you close the laptop, it's time to go home. So thank you very much for making it to my talk instead of strangling outside, so that's great. Just a little bit about myself. My name is Pindile Sidumo. I am a software engineer by profession. And I've added recently that I'm a conference speaker. So from the couple of conferences I've gone to, it's turned from, public humiliation to something that I feel a bit proud of. And I hope that today you'll be able to enjoy it. I currently work in a Vue.js team, so I'm mostly front end. So if you have any questions on Angular and React, currently I'm not equipped to answer you, but you probably can mingle and find somebody who can assist. And in all my socials, you can find me at JustPins, so this becomes my side projects as I become an influencer in real life. Yeah, so in my career, I have been mostly with, oh, there goes my clicker. Let me just come back. There we go. I've been with a company called BBD Software. Some of you guys might know it. I've been there for a while now, and that's where I've been able to gain my skills and progress in my career and be able to stand in front of you guys and give you a talk about how it's not CSS and it is in fact you. Yes, thank you for being brave enough to come here and take accountability. Everybody else was too scared or didn't care enough. And when you see them outside, tell them, go watch the recording, because it was for you too. Yeah, so when I gave my friends the title of my talk, they were like, wow, that feels so personal. Like, maybe try something different. And I was like, no, we're going to make it personal. The code I worked with made it personal, okay? So I'll tell you a little bit about myself a bit more since I made things personal. So I come from a house where I have 3 siblings, so there's 4 of us. But I like to tell people that I grew up as a 3rd child, or as a middle child, rather. And I know you're counting the math. You're like, okay, I'm not child 2.5, so I'll explain. And you didn't miss anything by not going to an AI talk. As you can see, I don't know who these children are, but Meta said these are you and your siblings. So firstly, there's my brother. Of course, he is the firstborn. He's the only male, so traditionally, he will inherit everything. He will be actually the only one who continues the family name. The rest of us will get married and merge with somebody else. So that leaves the 3 of us girls, and that's where the 3rd child syndrome comes in, okay? Again, lovely children, don't know who they are. So there's my big sister, of course, the first girl. Everybody was amazed, of course. She was the perfect little princess, grew up having everything given to her, which was great. And then there's my little sister. Again, she grew up in a different time, because for me it was, hey, but for her it was like, hey, don't do that, So she came out guns blazing, ruling everything in the house. And then there's me, somewhere, not the first, not the last, but if you look closely, I'm there in the family photos, okay, I promise. And I'm so middle child that even my name just means again. Your Pindile is just, oh, another one, yay, thank you. And one thing that you guys need to know about middle children is that we understand our situation, okay? We know that we need to do a little bit more to get noticed. We know that we're not gonna get the last cookie in the cookie jar because there's somebody else. And we're not gonna get the first gift because it needs to be passed on to us at some point. So we know how to rise above. We know how to make sure that we get noticed when we need to. And maybe that's why I ended up in tech, because I didn't want to just be one thing. I wanted to be a lot of things at the same time. And tech gave me all those opportunities. But ultimately, I did end up in web development, and I love it. Oh my gosh, the front end is amazing. You get to create those buttons, and people click on them. And I love it. Like, you get to see. Backhand people, I don't know how they do it. You're sending information, good for you. But what the user sees, that's the work that we do. And it's something that you can be very proud of. And I got to understand a lot more about the triad of the front end, our JavaScript, our CSS, and our HTML. And as I came to learn more about them, I understood that, hey, I can actually relate on how the front end actually is, because you have your HTML. A lot of us, that was the first file that we ever created on a notepad with the .html. You opened it on the browser and you're like, oh my gosh, I have a website. It's just a big text off of H1, and you're just like, you were so happy. And looking at that, it reminded me a lot of my older sister, was the first, and everybody cares because you can't use divs. You need to use semantic tags. Accessibility is a thing now, so please make sure that you care. And then there's JavaScript, created in 10 days, no order, but we love it. We're hacking away. And also, the only language in the front end that's considered a language, because if you tell somebody you code in HTML, good luck. If you go to a coding interview and you say, yeah, so how do I change it to HTML so I solve the thing? No, it doesn't work that way. And also, JavaScript look a bit familiar. No classes, no crazy stuff. We're doing what we gotta do. And yes, your structure may be correct. It may look pretty, but if it doesn't work, well, good luck sharing that with the client. And then I realized, oh my gosh, CSS is the middle child of the front end. Like, as much as we care about, yeah, you have your HTML and you have your JavaScript, CSS has to do a lot to be noticed, because for some reason, we just slap styles and keep it moving. If it looks if it looks like the Figma, then why do you need to spend more time on it? Let's keep it moving, right? And yeah, CSS is struggling at the bottom. And thank you for coming today, because we're going to bring it to light. And I know a lot of people, when they think about CSS, they just think about centering that div, and it gives them halt reputations. But we're going to make it more simpler. And I did some digging, and I was talking to people, and I realized, actually, the reason why a lot of people don't like CSS is just because they don't understand it. Like, you haven't actually taken the time to understand why the styles you're implementing are not coming through. You've refreshed the browser 5 times, and for some reason, the padding is still the same. And I know some of you are sitting in the audience, and you saw my title, and you saw it's you, and you're like, whoa, how is it me? It's CSS, it's the tech. I tell it what to do, and it's not doing it. And some of you, are more realistic. You know exactly what you're doing. You are part of the problem, and you're proud of it. You know the code that you're living. For a junior who's going to come someday and use important to fix because it just had to go to production immediately. And some of you are here to learn, so I'm grateful for that. And we will be able to learn something hopefully today. Because web development as a whole, together, is stronger. We don't just focus on one part of it, and then everything is going to work out. Psych, I've closed the doors, nobody's leaving. We are going to praise CSS today. Because when I talk to people, they don't want to tell the truth, okay? When you talk about, why don't you like the front end? It's CSS, bruh. No, it's lies. I know the fact that you don't have your objects and your classes, that's why you don't want to come to this side. And to be frank, for our older people in the audience, way back when the internet was just plain, everybody was a back-end developer, and then you guys got thrust into the front end, and they're like, put some colors over there, move the button to the bottom, and you're like, what the heck? But then over time, I don't think a lot has happened to put into light that, okay, yes, you're going to be our front-end developer. You've passed your coding JavaScript test, but do you actually know how to style this page so that we can maintain it for the next 15 years? No. So yeah, let's start from the beginning and see how we can be able to improve our CSS as we go along. So way back when the internet was first introduced, there wasn't really a plan on how to style it. It was going to be plain, static pages that are just presented. It was going to be fine. But over time, of course, people are like, well, if users are going to interact with this, it has to look a certain way. Our UX and UI sisters in arms are helping us, and it had to be a certain way for people to interact with it correctly. And that page was written by this guy, whose name is Mark. And when he was asked also way back in '94, he was like, well, we're screwed, because there's nothing that has been introduced thus far. Of course, as the developers and engineers that we are, that came as challenge accepted, because there had to be a solution to that problem. And of course, attempts were made so that we can be able to style the internet. But stuff like this came up, which is familiar. It looks like inline styling, but that's not going to be maintainable. We can't just slap styles on every single line of code. Maintaining that was going to be a nightmare. So there had to be a way of separating the two, making sure that we are able to style our pages without having to make it so tedious. And of course, there were a lot of attempts. A lot of people tried to put in their frameworks, their technologies, and make sure that they go in first. But this guy, Mr. Harkin Lee, was the one who came up with a very simple solution that everybody resonated with. And they were like, okay, we can definitely use this. And he named it after his pet goat. Don't quote me on that. And he called it cascading style sheets. It was very simple to understand, especially compared to its earlier competitors. It was a language that looked like this, and it was very familiar. You know, it was a declarative language where you can have your selector and have whatever style that you want to put, which is your property. You put it, you give it a value, and bada bing, bada boom, everything gets implemented, and everything started looking great. I went to the BBD website and I removed all their styles, and it looked kind of crappy. So we need our stylings because nobody wants to click on this. But that, on the other hand, looks very inviting. And what does this is actually in the name itself. It's the cascade. Styles are not just slapped on and put padding here and somehow it's going to find its way to where it's supposed to go. There's a way that these styles are being implemented that we can be able to understand and use to our advantage. And the cascade looks something like this. I know it's a lot, but it's a lot of layers that your CSS has to go through so that at the end, that's what you see on your page. And we'll start from the top with where your styles originate from and how important they are. Because as much as you have your styles that you have hacked away on your computer, they can also come from somewhere else. And don't freak out when you're like, wait, what's that and why is it doing there? So it looks something like this. So there's three places, or three main places that styles can come from. First is the user agent, which is whichever device or browser that you're using. And then obviously the user is also able to change some of those styles. And then lastly, your own authored styles. And as you can see, there's a scale of least specific to more specific, which means which one is going to win the race of appearing on your screen. So first, on the bottom of the list, it's the browser. It just hosts your page. It's fine. It's not going to take precedence on which styles are going to be implemented. But as soon as you introduce that important property, it jumps all the way to the front. And that's why, as you'll see throughout the talk, why it's important to not use important. Get it? And then the local user can change styles on their devices. You know, sometimes you build a website and then you open it on your device, it works, and you're like, Mom, can I see it on your phone? Maybe it look different. And then it does because she's ranked up the font to size high bubble, and then you're just like, wait, why does it look like this? It's because when CSS was created, it was decided that the user still needs to be able to change some things. So that's why when you open it, it won't look the same, but it's still your website, don't worry. And then lastly, it's your styles that you have on your side that you ship off with your code, and those will be implemented. And as you can see, that most specific changes as you add that important, that's why people want to come in and put in important to do a bug fix, and then they forget to remove it later, and then it's going to shift all your styles away. Cool. Next is the context. Context matters in everything, also in CSS. In CSS, when we talk about context, we're talking about which page you're working on, to put it more simply. So if you're working on a landing page, that page has its own DOM tree, right? That's called a host DOM. If you introduce any other, let's say, component to that page, you need to understand that component has its own DOM tree, and it will follow the same rules that that landing page is going to follow. That's why sometimes when you're trying to change stuff on a random component that you imported in and it's not working, it's because that component also has to follow the same cascade as the host file. And it looks something like this, as you can see. You have your document, which is the host document. You introduce your component, and that component has its own DOM, has its own styles that also have to be ranked through until the winning style, if I can put it that way, at the end is what you're going to see. And like we said, There's from least specific to most specific. So least specific, if it's just a regular component that probably your team developed, then you can use it, and you can be able to override those styles with stuff like deep and access all those classes, change whatever styles without having to actually go into the component itself and have to refactor that. But if you add important, like some of us who have used Bootstrap, and you're trying to change a style, and for some reason now you can't rely on Bootstrap because it's not working, it's because those styles are more specific, and they will be implemented more than your own styles that you're trying to override them with. And next is inline styling. To be basic with inline styling, it will win every single time. So if you have a bug and there's too many lines of code and it's just that one thing, put inline styling, it would work. This is not a professional advice. This is for when things need to be shipped off. But to understand it is just, if you put anything on your inline styling, it will override any of your other styles that are being imported from whichever file that you have them in. And that's just it. And as we have layers in CSS, there's even more layers in CSS, and they look like this. This was actually done by a lady named Sharon, and it was to help with specificity in CSS so that you can be able to actually target certain layers of CSS in your code, where your unlayered styles is usually what we do. You just pick a class, and then you style it in whichever way, but you can be able to group your stylings in layers so that you can be able to specifically style those elements only. And again, if you look at our from least specific to most specific, your normal layer styles like themes and utilities, those will be implemented least specifically. And then your normal unlayered styles will be implemented, but if you introduce important, it moves all the order on the other side. So now your layered styles and your utilities, your themes, those are the ones that will take precedence, but your unlayered styles will now not be implemented. And then this is a big one. Everybody has struggled with this one, as you'll see as we go on. CSS specificity. It's one of my favorites, but yeah, you'll see why. So in specificity, it's just which selector are you styling? And then that will then determine which style is being implemented. So you have your inline styling, as we saw before, and then if you style your ID, if you style your class, or your pseudo class, or your attributes, and then lastly, if you style elements, or your pseudo elements. And it's something like this. You know when you open up your dev tools and you don't know why you can't see that red button, and the styles are being scratched out, and you're like, why would this be scratched? This is what I need, but instead the other style is being implemented instead of the one that I just wrote right now, is because of specificity. That if you style an ID, that's the style that you're gonna see, but if you have a class, that's gonna be scratched out. Also, if you style a tag or an element, that's gonna come in third. And this usually happens, or you see it a lot, if you have global styles, or if you don't have scope styling for specific components or for specific pages, that if you use that one selector that has the name main, and every other page has main, and now the whole website is orange instead of just one page, is because of specificity. You've used the selector that is going to color all the other selectors that are on the page also. And this is also very tricky because we have wonderful designers who will color the whole page green, but for some reason that one part of the page has to be orange, and styles that are supposed to be simple and achievable, now you're targeting a container that has a p tag, but then it's a pseudo class, but it's the first one of that, and then another container on that, because you're just trying to target that one element on the page and just change that one thing. So what helps is if you make sure that you are increasing the specificity of that styling, and you can be able to style those things instead of changing everything else. And it looks a little something like this. So it's like a scoring system, I like to say. So you get 1 point for every selector that you put when you're trying to style that specific element that you're styling on the page. So if you have inline styling, you get 1 point, and it makes it 1,000. And then an ID, it makes it 100. If it's a class, you get 10 points. And if it's an element, it's just 1 point. So here we're styling a header ID with a class and 2 elements. That's going to give it 112 or 112. And then this one, where we're styling 2 classes and 3 elements, which will give us 23 or 23 in specificity. And then lastly, again, if you use inline styling, it's going to override everything. It gets 1,000. That's what you will see displayed on your page. And that's the cascade. Now guys know how to style. You know how to be pros at this. But we're not done. This is CSS. What do you mean? Now, layouts. Because as much as you can put color on it, is it supposed to be at the top, at the bottom, on the side? Is it supposed to float somewhere in the middle, over top of another element? Yeah, and I know what you're thinking. Layouts, that's easy. We can just flex everything. We're good to go. We don't need to go deep into this conversation. It's like, no. So we love flex, and we can use it for everything, but there are other layouts that we can go through. As you can see, there's flow, flexbox, grid, positioning that also helps, tables, and floats. So when we talk about normal flow, it means that you're so good at your HTML that you don't actually even have to go back to your CSS and rearrange the styles or the layout of your page. That when you actually use the tags that you're supposed to be using, like an aside tag, instead of putting a margin of 50% and moving something to the side, you don't have to then have a long file of your CSS. Make sure that you plan out your HTML as you will plan out anything else. And then there's floats. I do see some gray hairs around, so I have never worked with float, but I know you have. So floats, honestly, in the beginning, it wasn't meant to be or meant for using it as a layout. It was more of just moving, let's say, images to the side, and then everything else flows on the side of that image. But over time, they found that some browsers were having some iffy issues when it came to floating images or floating things on your page. So be careful when using floats. And then there's tables. I will say don't, okay? Don't use tables unless you are actually displaying tabular information. It is not a great way of making a layout for your page. It is a cheat code because you create columns and rows and you put things where they're supposed to, but then you put it on a fold phone and then you have a horizontal scroll. Nobody likes that, okay? So if it's not meant to be in a table, don't put it in a table. And then there's positioning. And I know, again, when you think about positioning, yeah, let's just put it on absolutes. We'll put things where they're supposed to go. That's not how it works. Absolute is used for certain stylings or actually certain layouts. And it looks like this. In positioning, it's a property, so you're able to give it certain values. And they have 5 values. Static just means it will follow the normal flow of the structure that you have on your HTML. It will be static to where it's supposed to be. And then relative just means relative to its original position, not relative to the actual viewport of whichever device that you have. And then absolute floats it out of the actual DOM tree. Now it's floating by itself, also relative to the nearest element that it has, that is on the page, or to how big that container is. And then fixed just means ignore the scroll, so that if you need that button at the bottom, you can fix it there. And then sticky, also similar to fixed, but inside a specific container. Hope that makes sense. And then, of course, our favorites, which is the display property that gives us flex and the grid, and we love it. And I know flex is a way to flex the direction of the elements on your page, but it's more for one-dimensional direction. So it's either you flex it in a row or flex it in a column. And then once you flex them that way, you are able to then access these other properties with very great values to be able to manipulate all your layouts in different ways, because we have wonderful designers who will give you just great things to work with. So you're able to flex the direction, as I said, in a row or column, reverse it, and then you're able to align your items, justify your content, align the content. You can put space in between, put it at the top, put it at the bottom. It's amazing. Yes, you can do everything in Flex. You can center a div. You can put the button at the bottom. It's fine. Even making a table, actually, I tried it the other day. You can flex. You can use flex to do that. But as we know, there's also grid, which is not as famous. because a lot of people do find it more complicated. Because with the grid, just like how before you create a database, you have to actually sit down and create all the relationships and everything where it's supposed to go and what's supposed to be where. Same thing when it comes to the grid, okay? You have to take some time, look at your layouts, actually know what's supposed to sit where on your page before you go and you start putting things where you want them to be. And a very, very big highlight for grid is that it is great with responsiveness. As we know, devices are getting longer, wider, in weird shapes and forms. So we need something that's going to be able to keep up with that. And grid is able to do that. It looks a little something like this, where you're able to assign to your different elements on the page, your classes or your IDs, and then in that container, whichever element that you have that contains the entire page, you can assign the display to grid, and then you can size your columns, size your rows on how they're going to be big, and then you can then assign the different elements to different areas of the page, depending on how big the columns and the rows are. And the great thing about CSS Grid is that you still have access to those properties that you had in display in the Flexbox, where you can still justify your content, align your items in all those different columns and rows that you've created. But as we know, simple things turn very, very complicated very easily in many, many projects that we have been on, that we keep adding things and adding, but it becomes simple if you've taken your time to actually plan it out, and then you know exactly what you're targeting on the page, what it's supposed to look like, and how everything is going to plan out. So there you go. Now you guys are able to center a div. Right? Right? We can center a div. Yeah, I don't know. Let's test it out. Okay, so we'll go to my very, very simplified demo. Let me just, are you guys good with that, or should I go some more back? This was good. Okay, cool. Those at the back, you chose to be there. Huh? Okay, so these are very simple demos to show just the simplicity of our wonderful CSS. We'll come back to centering a div. Let's start with specificity, as we said. So here, don't mind this div, just know it's the class container, okay? Imagine semantics in your head. So there's a class container, and then we have an ID of main in this section. Then we have a p tag and an anchor tag. We're trying to style this link text in between here. And I want to see, there's some participation, by a show of hands. Like, if you think it's going to be option 1, where the link text is going to be green, where we're targeting the ID and the anchor tag, and we're coloring it green, or if we just target the p tag and the anchor tag, and it's going to be yellow, which is option 2, and then option 3, where we are targeting the container, which is a class, and then the ID and the anchor tag, and we're coloring it orange. So 1, 2, or 3, just by a show of hands. Okay, I see 2, I see 3, I saw 1 at the back. Okay, drum roll. Now I wish I had a prize. I'm so sorry, guys. And as you can see, it is number 3. The link is orange, but why is it orange? Let's see. So if you open up your dev tools, when you have an issue on why your styles are not being implemented, you can just select that element and then see the styles. And as you can see here, all those are scratched out. If you actually hover over the elements, it will tell you the specificity so that you know for yourself, okay, it's because I'm not increasing the specificity of this element that I want to style, so I can override the other styles. So this one had a specificity of 2, so not that great. And then this one had 101. But because we added the class on this one of the container, it upped the specificity to 111. So now that's the style that we see. So in any of your projects where you know that you can't necessarily change the original styles, but you want to override certain styles, just increase the specificity of that styling that you want to implement, and you'll see it displayed on your page. Okay, cool. Now let's go to structure and why your HTML actually plays a role on how you style your pages. There we go. Okay, so we have this side by side. So basically, here we're going to look at the structure that you've first put down before you actually put your or implement your CSS. That on this side, we have this nav tag, and then we have an h1 tag. Then we have a section that contains 3 p tags. Cool. And then on this side, same thing. It's a nav tag, but this side we don't have a section. We have all the elements sitting inside the nav tag itself, which is the h1 and the 3 p tags. And as I'll show you here, these look the same. So as you can see, this is our h1, this is our 3 p tags, and the whole thing is yellow, and it is a nav bar. Cool. I'll just pull this to here. And then I'll show you that this one also looks the same. It's the h1, and it's our 3 items to the side, and it's yellow. Awesome. And if we look at our styles, on this side, we're using grid. We're sizing our columns, and then we're just centering our items. But on this side, we're using flex, and then we're aligning on the items, and we're putting space in between. And why is that? This is to just show us that your HTML matters when you're going to implement your styles. Depending on what you have on your HTML and what structure you've actually put down, or the normal flow of the page that you've just built, will have an effect on which styling you use when you style your page. So it's very important to, like I said, take some time to actually plan out your styles, or plan out even your HTML to see, okay, how do we want this page to look? Do we really need a section here to contain all these p tags, or can we just have it like this, where all the elements are inside the nav tag? Is this going to be clickable? Is this going to be tagged in some type of way? Are we going to reuse it? What's happening? So all of those things will determine on what then you use. And then lastly, let's look at centering our div. There we go. So here we have something simple. Let me just comment this out. Cool. We just have a class of container and a main. That's it. It's just 2 divs, and we're going to try to center it. So the first option, we're just going to use display flex, and then we give it a height of 100. We justify our content, and we align our items to the center. The second option is that we're going to target our main, which is inside the container, and then we're going to put a top of 50, a left of 50, transform that, and then give it a position of absolute. And then the last one, number 3, is we're going to use some margins, 50 at the top, 50 on the side, and then we transform that so that it centers itself. Okay. Again, by a show of hands, 1, 2, or 3, which one will center a div for us? I see 2, 1, 1. Oh, 1 is winning. 2. Nobody trusts number 3. No? Okay, cool. Let's put number 1. Let's put number 1. Let's see what happens. Oh, congratulations. Number 1 works. You were right, guys. Okay, but let's see what happens with number 2. Good on you, number 2. It also works. You were not wrong. But then number 3, which no one chose, what does it do? Hey, it centers a div. So yes, like any other thing in tech, there are multiple ways of achieving the same thing. But at the end, you choose it because of whatever else is going to be on the page. If you're going to flex it, it's not just going to flex this one element, it's going to flex everything else that you have in that container. So don't just use flex, because right now it's just this one button. And then the designs come back, now there's 3 other things. Now you're not just changing your HTML to add an extra thing, you have to go back and change your styles also to be able to accommodate that. If it's number 2, you're using absolutes. Is this supposed to float on top of things? Or is this like some type of action sheet? Because now it's going to take it out of that DOM tree and put it on top of all the other elements that are on your page. And then lastly, if you use margins, you're moving everything else on the page. You're putting space, you're saying, please step to the side, I don't want to be close to you. But yeah, so thank you guys for participating on that. I hope that helped a bit to visualize what we were doing. So I know some of you have enjoyed my talk, but thank you, Pindi. I still think this is not for me. And that's fair, that's fair. As the engineers that we are, we love we love to find things that will make our work a bit easier, okay? There are many tools that we have been provided with that are going to help us to be more efficient, faster at delivery, make sure that our product owners are happy because the timelines are getting shorter and shorter. So please go ahead and use these tools. But the thing is, you need to know what's happening underneath, okay? You're busy using Tailwind when it's just CSS with utility classes, you know? And now you're confused why, when I put it in line, it overrides my other style that I have on my other page. Why is that happening? It's because the cascade is working in the background. It all makes sense. So just to close us off, take time to plan out your CSS and your HTML. It seems tedious, I know. But when you take the time to actually put down the correct structure and then put down the correct styles, in the end, it's going to work out. And as you've seen, don't use important. Important will ruin your life because it follows no rules, okay? It's JavaScript. But yeah, be very careful when using important. There are situations where we're working with legacy code and there's nothing you can do but put important. But if you're writing that code right now and it has important, it's you. It's clearly not CSS. And then lastly, just make sure whatever you write, it's either your future self or some junior who's coming who will be happy with what they see and they'll be able to fix any of the problems that come up. And just lastly, CSS is awesome. I know a lot of people, or even myself, it gives us a lot of headaches on how to make it more simpler, but it is simple when you know such principles. Thank you guys so much for attending my talk.